The wind howled across the shattered cityscape, swirling dust and debris into the air, painting the world in shades of gray. Seraphina's boots crunched over broken glass and twisted metal as she moved through the ruins. The world, once filled with life, now lay dormant, empty streets, ruined buildings, and the smell of decay that lingered like a permanent stain. Her breath was shallow, her body tense, every nerve stretched thin as she navigated the dangerous silence of a world long abandoned. She had learned to survive in this post-apocalyptic wasteland, where the lines between human and monster blurred, and the earth had become a twisted version of itself. The city around her had once been a symbol of progress, of civilization. Now, it was nothing more than a graveyard of mankind's failed ambitions. Seraphina paused, pressing her back against the crumbling wall of a once bustling skyscraper. Her hand instinctively went to the knife strapped to her waist, fingers brushing its cold steel. Her senses were heightened, alert for any movement. There was a rustle, a whisper of something out of place. She whipped her head toward the source of the sound but saw nothing. Nothing but shadows that seemed to move of their own accord. The monsters, the things that haunted this world, were never far. They came in many forms, some with the appearance of twisted creatures, others like shadows that would consume you before you even knew they were there. But there was always something. Always. She exhaled slowly, trying to steady her racing heart. Get moving, the thought pushed her forward. She had learned that stopping was dangerous. Resting was a luxury she couldn't afford. The city had once been a symbol of hope, a testament to humanity's reach. Now, it was just another corpse. A hollow, decaying reminder of a world that had turned on its creators. Seraphina didn't dwell on the past anymore. She couldn't. It was a luxury she had no time for. Ahead, she spotted a flicker of movement. Her pulse quickened as she instinctively ducked into the shadow of an alleyway. From here, she had a clear view of the street ahead, but she could also see the flickering light ahead, a dim glow that didn't belong. Not another survivor. But it couldn't be. No one else had been this close in days. She had been alone for so long, surviving on her own wits and the few scraps of humanity left behind. The light was soft but steady, pulsing like a heartbeat. A signal. A sign. Seraphina's breath caught in her throat as she took a step closer, her hand tightening on her knife. A flicker of hope tried to take root, but she stomped it down. Focus. The light was coming from an old research station, one of the last surviving structures in the city. The station had been abandoned for years, its purpose forgotten in the chaos that followed the collapse. The lights in the distance were the only sign of life for miles around. It was either a trap or a miracle. She couldn't be sure, but she was drawn to it nonetheless. Her footsteps were quick but cautious as she approached the building. The station loomed ahead, its metal walls covered in layers of grime and rust. The windows, once clear, were now stained, like the eyes of someone who had seen too much. The door, half open, creaked in the wind as if beckoning her inside. Is this really happening? Seraphina's mind raced as she pushed the door open with her shoulder. It groaned in protest, but she didn't flinch. She couldn't afford to show fear. There was no room for it in this new world. Only survival. Inside, the air was musty, thick with the smell of old machinery and stale air. The faint hum of something running filled the silence. A generator, perhaps, or some kind of power source. The light flickered again, casting shadows on the walls. Seraphina's eyes darted around, scanning for movement, but everything was still. Dead. She moved deeper into the building, her breath catching in her throat as she reached a terminal. A single screen was glowing softly in the corner of the room, flickering intermittently, as if something was trying to boot up. Her curiosity outweighed her caution. The screen was an anachronism in this world, a piece of humanity's past, still alive. She stepped closer, her heart pounding. The terminal was barely functioning, its surface scratched and cracked. But there was still power. She placed her hand on the keyboard, her fingers hovering over the keys. The screen flickered once more, then words appeared. Asterisk. Access granted? Asterisk. Her eyes widened. How was this possible? There was no electricity left, no systems still running in the city. The buildings had long since been abandoned, the grids down for years. The flicker of a functioning terminal could only mean one thing: someone, or something, had been keeping this place running. Before she could fully process the information, the terminal blinked again. The words changed. Asterisk. Hello, Seraphina. Asterisk. Her breath caught in her throat. How, her name? How did it know? There was no time to dwell on the thought. She had been alone in this city for so long that any sign of life, any connection to something outside this decaying world, felt like a miracle. But it also felt wrong. A trap. A low rumble vibrated through the floor, and Seraphina froze, her hands still on the terminal. The hum of the machine grew louder, a steady pulse in the air. It was no longer a flicker. It was real. Something was here. And then she heard it. A growl. Deep. Animalistic. Familiar. Seraphina whipped around, her heart pounding in her chest as the temperature in the room dropped, the shadows darkening around her. The door she had entered through was gone. She was trapped. The growl intensified, growing louder, echoing in her ears. It wasn't one creature. There were many. Her pulse quickened. She wasn't alone. And this place? It wasn't abandoned. The growl reverberated again, louder now, and the lights in the terminal flickered. The words on the screen began to change once more. Asterisk. Run, Seraphina. Asterisk. She didn't need to be told twice. She grabbed the knife and sprinted toward the back of the room. Something was coming. The power of the terminal, the voice that knew her name, was no coincidence. It was part of something bigger. And she was about to find out what. Seraphina's heart raced as she darted toward the back of the room. The growl, a deep, inhuman sound, echoed through the abandoned research station, reverberating in the walls like an oppressive force. She could feel the vibrations beneath her feet, the weight of the room shifting, as though the very air was thickening with every step she took. The terminal's light flickered again, casting harsh shadows that seemed to move as if alive. Asterisk. What is this place? What is going on? Asterisk. Her mind spun with questions, but there was no time for answers. She couldn't think. She couldn't stop. Every fiber of her being screamed at her to get out, to escape whatever horror was coming for her. The room was too quiet, too still. It didn't make sense. The growls had stopped, replaced by an unsettling silence that made her skin crawl. She sprinted toward the back of the room, her eyes darting over every piece of equipment in search of an exit. The walls, once covered in dust, now seemed to pulse, as if the building itself was reacting to her presence. Suddenly, a sharp metallic clang echoed from behind her. She spun around, just in time to see the door she had entered from slammed shut. The sound of something heavy scraping across the floor followed, and Seraphina's breath caught in her throat. There was no way out. The only way forward was through the narrow hallway she had spotted earlier. Panic surged within her chest, but she swallowed it down. There was no room for panic here. Not in a world like this. She had to survive. With a final glance at the terminal, the only hint of something familiar in this nightmare, Seraphina bolted for the hallway, the low hum of machinery growing louder as she neared. The hallway was narrow and dark, barely wide enough for her to squeeze through. As she ran, the walls seemed to close in, the darkness consuming her every step. The smell hit her first. It was a sickly, metallic stench, one that reminded her of decay, of something old and rotting. It was overwhelming, and it seemed to grow stronger the farther she went into the tunnel-like space. The walls here were damp, dripping with moisture that didn't belong in a building as old as this. She pressed on, determined to find a way out. Her footfalls echoed down the narrow passage, louder than she wanted them to be, a constant reminder that whatever was behind her was getting closer. She could hear the scrapping noise again, soft at first, but growing louder with each step she took. The sound was almost rhythmic, as if something, or someone, was pacing behind her. Seraphina didn't dare look back. She had learned long ago that looking behind you in situations like this could mean the difference between survival and death. She focused on the path ahead, the weak light from the overhead lamps flickering erratically as she pushed forward. And then she saw it. A faint light ahead, coming from what looked like a small doorway. It was barely visible, but it was enough to give her a glimmer of hope. Her legs burned with exhaustion, but she pushed herself harder, her pace quickening. She reached the doorway in a matter of seconds, throwing herself through it without a second thought. The moment she crossed the threshold, she was met with an overwhelming rush of air, cold and damp, like stepping into the heart of a storm. She stumbled, her legs unsteady from the frantic sprint, but she managed to catch herself on the wall. The space before her was cavernous, unlike anything she had expected. It was a vast underground chamber, the walls lined with pipes and machinery that hummed and clicked, some of it still active, despite the years of neglect. The light was dim, barely enough to illuminate the outlines of the room, but the sense of foreboding was palpable. The temperature here was colder, as if the air had been trapped for centuries. In the center of the room stood a large, cylindrical structure, its surface covered in strange markings. The metal was dark and aged, worn by time, but the air around it pulsed with a strange energy. Seraphina's instincts flared, her body tense, as if the very room was watching her, waiting. She took a step forward, drawn to the machine. The markings on its surface were unlike any she had seen before, strange, alien symbols that seemed to twist and change as her eyes moved over them. It was as though the machine was alive, its surface shifting beneath the dim light. Her breath caught in her throat as she neared it. The machine seemed to hum louder, vibrating under her touch. She reached out, her hand trembling as she placed it against the cold metal. As soon as her skin made contact, a jolt of energy shot through her, the shockwave rattling her entire body. She gasped, stumbling backward. The humming stopped. The room fell silent. For a moment, everything seemed frozen in place. The air felt heavy, thick with something she couldn't describe. It was like the world had paused, waiting for something to happen. And then, the machine activated. Lights flickered on around her, brighter now, illuminating the room in a blinding flash. The hum returned, louder this time, as if the machine was awakening from a long slumber. The symbols on its surface began to glow, and the very walls seemed to shift in response. Seraphina's heart raced as she stumbled back, panic flooding her senses. She had no idea what was happening, but she knew one thing for certain: the machine was alive, and it was calling to something dangerous. Something that had been dormant for far too long. Before she could make sense of the situation, the air shifted again, the temperature dropping even further. A deep growl rumbled from the depths of the chamber, and Seraphina's blood ran cold. It wasn't just the machine that had awakened. Something else was coming. The sound grew louder, closer now, as the shadows in the corner of the room seemed to shift. A form materialized from the darkness, tall and massive, its shape distorted and unnatural. It moved with a slow, deliberate grace, its eyes glowing with an eerie light. Seraphina's breath caught in her throat. She knew this creature. It was not of this world, and it was coming for her. Her instincts screamed at her to run. But there was nowhere to go. Seraphina's pulse raced in her ears as the monstrous shape loomed closer, the growl rumbling deep from within its chest. Every inch of her body screamed for escape, but there was nowhere to run. The shadows stretched unnaturally around it, as if the darkness itself was alive, bending to its will. She could feel its presence, overwhelming and oppressive, pushing against her, tightening her chest. The room seemed to shrink with every breath she took, every step it took toward her. The creature's eyes glowed a sickly yellow, its face a blur of shifting shadows. The air around it was thick, the temperature dropping so rapidly that Seraphina could see her breath mist in front of her. It was like walking into the grip of death itself, slow, suffocating, inescapable. Think. You have to think, She was no stranger to danger. She had survived things that would have broken others. She had fought through desperation, fought through pain and fear. But this was different. This wasn't a wild animal, or even a human enemy. This was something else, something old, something unseen. And it had found her. Her knife was still clutched in her hand, the steel cold and steady against her palm, but it felt like a toy in her grip now. The creature wasn't going to be stopped by something so small. She could feel it in the air. The creature didn't just want to kill her. It wanted to consume. It wanted to erase her from existence, make her nothing more than another piece of this broken world. She took a step back, her mind racing for an escape, for a way to survive. The narrow, crumbling passage behind her was blocked, the way forward cut off. The machine, that damn machine was still humming, its lights flashing erratically as if it had stirred something ancient. She didn't know what it had activated, or why it had drawn the creature to her, but she didn't have time to figure it out now. The thing was close. Too close. The creature took another slow, deliberate step toward her, its claws scraping the floor. The sound of it echoed in her skull, a maddening, scraping noise that rattled her teeth. She could feel its eyes on her, unblinking, predatory. Its breath was a foul mist, cold and putrid as it exhaled with every movement. Seraphina's back hit the wall, her body stiffening as the realization settled in. She had no way out. No way to fight. Her options had all been exhausted, and she was running out of time. No. Not like this. Her thoughts were a blur, a whirlwind of panic and adrenaline. But she couldn't let fear consume her. Not yet. Not until she had fought with everything she had left. The creature's mouth opened slowly, revealing rows of jagged, sharp teeth that gleamed in the dim light. The stench that emanated from it was suffocating, a mixture of rotting flesh and decay. The air was so thick now that it felt as though it was closing in on her, wrapping around her throat, suffocating her in its grip. Fight, Seraphina. She lifted her knife, the cold steel gleaming in the low light. It felt small, like a useless tool against the monster, but it was all she had. And as much as she wanted to believe she could outfight it, outsmart it, deep down, she knew she was at a disadvantage. The creature was beyond anything she had encountered before. Its presence alone was enough to break her resolve. But there was one thing she knew. If she was going to die, she wasn't going to die kneeling. Not without a fight. She wasn't going to give in to the terror it promised so easily. The creature's eyes narrowed, its body tensing as if it were preparing to strike. It stepped forward, its claws scraping the floor with a chilling screech. It was faster than she anticipated, closing the gap between them in a heartbeat. Seraphina's heart slammed against her ribs as she swung her knife, her body moving on instinct, not thought. The blade cut through the air with a sharp hiss, but it was nothing more than a wild swing, barely grazing the creature's dark form. The moment her knife made contact, the creature let out a guttural growl, spinning on its heel and swiping at her with a speed that left her no room to react. The claws slashed across her arm, and Seraphina cried out as pain seared through her. The wound burned, hot and vicious, but she didn't have time to think about it. She could feel the blood seeping down her sleeve, pooling in her hand, but she couldn't stop. She couldn't give in. With a desperate cry, she lunged forward, using every last ounce of strength she had left to plunge the knife into the creature's side. The blade sank deep, but it wasn't enough. The creature howled in rage, but it didn't falter. Instead, it threw her against the wall with a sickening crash, the impact rattling her bones. Seraphina slumped to the ground, her vision blurring as blood pooled around her. The creature's growl echoed in the darkness, louder now, a taunting sound. She could barely move. The pain from her wounds was unbearable, but she forced herself to stay conscious. She had to. She couldn't let it be over. She was pinned against the wall, but the ground beneath her began to tremble. The hum of the machine grew louder, and the walls seemed to pulse in time with the sound. The machine had to be the key. It had to be. With what little strength she had left, Seraphina pushed herself up, her body screaming in protest. The creature was looming over her now, its eyes glowing with hunger. It knew it had her cornered. But she wasn't done. Not yet. She reached out, her fingers brushing the cold metal of the machine's controls. It flickered, sparking as the lights above her went wild. The room shook once more, the ground buckling beneath her feet. Please, she thought, pushing the button. Please work. The room exploded into blinding light. End of chapter 3. The explosion of light was immediate, blinding, and overwhelming. Seraphina's body was thrown backward with an intensity that felt like her very bones were being shattered. The force of the blast ripped through the room, the walls shaking, the ground beneath her trembling with the kind of violence only a world-ending force could produce. The cold grip of the creature that had been looming over her disappeared in the chaos, and for a moment she couldn't tell if she was alive or lost to the void. She gasped for air as the world around her slowed, the stifling heat of the explosion fading into an almost surreal calm. Her body felt like it was drowning in the silence that followed. The air was thick, charged with energy, yet empty, as if everything around her had been swallowed whole by the explosion itself. Did I survive? The thought was fleeting, but it wasn't the first time she'd wondered if she was still breathing. Her senses were overloaded, her head spinning as she blinked rapidly, trying to adjust to the absence of light, the overwhelming emptiness surrounding her. Pain lanced through her, sharp and all-encompassing, like fire running through her veins. The world around her spun, but she fought to push through, to pull herself together. The wounds on her arm burned with the reminder of the creature's claws, but there was no time to focus on them. She needed to survive. The machine had done something more than just throwing her across the room. There was a hum in the air now, vibrating through the ground, filling the silence with its eerie, constant thrum. She raised her head, her body still weak but pushing through the haze of pain. The creature, the one that had haunted her, was gone. But was it truly? A deep rumble resonated from the center of the room, and Seraphina's heart lurched in her chest. The explosion had caused the walls to crack, to shift, but beneath the remnants of the building lay something else, something that was alive. The floor beneath her trembled again, a harsh, unnatural sound that made her body freeze. The sound wasn't just the building collapsing. It was something far more menacing, far more alive. A crack appeared in the center of the room, growing wider with each passing second. The sound of shifting stone and metal scraped against the air, as though something was emerging from the depths of the earth itself. Seraphina scrambled to her feet, her legs unsteady beneath her. She couldn't stay here. The explosion had done something to the machine, but it hadn't destroyed it entirely. It had awoken something deeper, something that had been waiting, dormant for far too long. As the crack widened, a deep, throaty growl emanated from within the rift, louder this time. It was almost as if the very ground was growling in response, the sound of pain, of hunger. The creature wasn't gone. It had only been delayed. The blast had only pushed it back. It was still coming, and this time, there would be no escape. I have to fight. Her thoughts were blurry, but she knew one thing: survival wasn't guaranteed. With shaky hands, Seraphina retrieved the knife from her belt, holding it out in front of her. It was her only weapon now. Her only chance. Her breathing quickened, her heart thudding erratically in her chest as the crack in the floor widened even further. The room was shaking as though the very fabric of reality was being torn apart. Then, from the rift, something massive and dark began to emerge, like an ancient beast clawing its way back to life. Its form was massive, incomprehensible. Twisted shapes, swirling in the darkness. It was a being far beyond anything she could ever imagine, more monstrous than any creature she had faced before. Its eyes glowed, a sickly yellow, and Seraphina could feel its gaze seeping into her mind, invading her every thought. She could almost taste the terror in the air as it crawled toward her. She staggered back, her foot slipping against the cracked floor. There was no room to run. She could feel the creature's presence, suffocating her, a physical force that gripped her throat and squeezed. It spoke, but not with words. The voice filled her mind, swirling with an ancient hatred, a twisted understanding of humanity. Asterisk. You thought you could escape. But you are nothing. You are weak. And now you are mine. Asterisk. Seraphina's body tensed with fear, but she refused to let it overtake her. She wasn't about to die at the hands of this thing. Not after everything she had survived. With a roar that shook the very foundations of the building, the creature lunged, its claws raking the air with the force of a storm. Seraphina didn't hesitate. She darted to the side, narrowly avoiding its massive form as it crashed into the ground, sending debris flying. She moved instinctively, her body driven by pure adrenaline. The creature's massive body continued to shift, its form melding into a nightmare, with jagged edges and distorted features. It didn't move like a creature, it moved like something that wasn't meant to move in this world. But Seraphina wouldn't let it consume her. She had come too far. She had survived too much. And no matter how terrifying this thing was, she wasn't going to let it take her down without a fight. She ran, not towards the creature, but away from it. Towards the door that had closed behind her. If she could reach it, if she could reach the terminal, there was still hope. Maybe not for her. Maybe not for the world. But if she could shut down whatever the machine had awakened, if she could stop the creature from fully emerging. The ground trembled again as the creature shrieked, its claws slashing through the air. The room around her continued to shake, the walls buckling under the force. But she didn't stop. Her breath was ragged, her body a collection of aches and bruises, but she didn't stop. She reached the door, her hand outstretched, ready to pull it open, but just before her fingers could touch the handle, the creature slammed into the wall beside her, its massive form crashing through the stone. The room seemed to implode as the creature's scream shattered everything in sight. And Seraphina? She had no choice but to face it. The final confrontation had begun.